Okay, I think when we left off our conversation, you were talking about finishing college and your thoughts on what you're going to do after
Okay, I can
college.
take it right from there. Is it open now?
Yes.
At the at during the second half of the last year at college, I started to wonder about what I was going to do, and I was a little scared and a little apprehensive. And so the first thing I was trying to decide was which of two basic directions to go, because at that time, people from institutions like mine went into brokerage, banking, or insurance. And then the other direction would have been academia. And so I thought about the friends I had at college at that time, and I decided that my personality was more for the academic direction. So that's what I decided to do. And when I graduated finally, I didn't graduate with a lot of high self-esteem, and I applied to several graduate schools around the country and decided to, and I recall this, that I was really apprehensive about somehow going too far away. So I decided to stay in Connecticut and went to the University of Connecticut at Storrs, Connecticut. And it was just something about not getting too far away from New Haven, so something to lean on, very, very psychological. And then I went up to Storrs in the next fall, and in conventional parlance, I had a breakdown. Now, it didn't seem like a breakdown to me at the time. It just seemed like things were going a little rough. I took 4 courses and I finished 2, and 2 were incomplete. And I really got concerned about running out of money, and so since I had had that scholarship job in the library at college, just sitting there in the main reading room, nothing more than that. But it did occur to me, libraries, so I decided to go down to fulfill I'm not going to say a dream, fulfill a desire to go to New York, and I did, and I enrolled in Columbia Library School and got a job with the New York Public Library. And so the psychological underpinning of that was that when I look at it from the perspective of the present, I know that like the break in college, I had a psychological breakdown. It just didn't seem that way to me because I was so middle class and so fixated on not falling through the protective net of life and not ending up in some really horrible situation that like I grasped out in college for the Army, and that got me through the next 2 years, so that in this case I reached out and went to the New York Public Library for a job. And what I do remember, I remember at the interview, I was interviewed by the head of the library and by the head of the borrowing section of, public library is divided into research and circulate and public borrowing. I was interviewed by these 2 men, and I remember sitting there, and they said, well, do you think he he will be all right, or something like that. And the other guy said, oh, yes. And I remember sitting there, and as I look back on it, I don't know whether this is literal or not, but I remember being slumped over and really disappointed in the situation. At any rate, I took it up. I worked for the New York Public Library for 5 years. I finished up library school in, I went, I think one term, I worked part-time and took 4 courses, and the rest of the time I took 2 courses at a time at the library school. In the library school, I tended to emphasize English courses at Columbia because I was allowed to take them. So I did that rather than library management courses, which I guess were available at that time. Much different. Library school is much different now. And of course, Columbia's is closed because ultimately the library school curriculum did not measure up to the quality of the normal humanities programs in history and philosophy and so forth. Library school was filled with a lot of English and history majors who weren't sure what they were doing. And then as I went through that experience, I began to revive a little confidence and decided to keep going academically. So I enrolled in the Master's in English program at NYU and continued to work in the library, and did finally get a master's in a Master's of Arts, MA, in English. And during all that time, I was single. I was having some enjoyment of single life in New York. I was in the process of, I had a love affair with one of the librarians that ended badly for me because she decided that it was over, and I was really in bad shape for a few months after that. Then a opening came up of being a manuscript and rare book librarian at a place called the Berg, B-E-R-G collection at the New York Public Library, and I got that job and had it for a couple of years, and as a cataloger there. And then I still, and during that time, I was single, and I also got married. And about the time I got married in 1966, I was looking for a situation where I could be part-time at the library and be enrolled in the Columbia English PhD program. And it didn't work out at the public library, so I went to Columbia and they gave me a part-time job. So for the next couple of years, I was at Columbia and married and working at Columbia and being enrolled in the PhD program at Columbia. But I never accomplished more than taking courses. I think I hardly ever wrote a paper. And with the state of the marriage, the way it was, and it started out with difficulty and continued. I really didn't finish anything but the classwork at Columbia. Then Dorothy got pregnant with Corey, and it became time to leave New York, and I was able to find a job at a small college in to in a sense realize my ambition of teaching English, and I got a job at a small college in Monmouth County, New Jersey, called Monmouth College, and I was pleased about that, but very uncertain, I was not confident about my teaching abilities, and the first year at the college, as looking back on it, was really not very successful as a teacher. I began to gain a little confidence, and the job lasted 2 more years before my time at the college ran out with not having a PhD, and I made no further progress on the PhD at Columbia, and finally just let it slip. And when I was notified that my contract at the college was not going to be renewed, I started looking for a library job, and at that time, the only thing I was able to find was a reference librarian job with the Monmouth County Library, which I took in June of 1972. So once that I had left the college, gotten a job with the county library, I continued to try and get other library jobs. Didn't work out. So for the next 28 years, I was with the Monmouth County Library. There were certainly ups and downs in my career at the library. I was a very competent librarian, but I certainly had trouble with with accepting supervision. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know what was. I didn't know why I had trouble at college, and then at University of Connecticut, and then in my working life too, until years later in 1997, when I met Joyce Silver, and under her guidance, I would say, and her love, I was able to begin psychotherapy and a process of understanding what had happened to me and why I hadn't been more successful. Now, the period of time at the library was fraught with marital conflict, with extreme financial difficulty. There was a time I remembered when Corey was in grade school that she qualified for a lunch supplement. I was that low in income that I qualified for that, and that was not a happy circumstance. We had to move a number of times during the first few years of Corey's school. Now, Mandy was born 6.5 years later, and I had thought about divorce, but when Mandy was born, I abandoned the idea of ever going away, and I would have had to have been a completely different person under those circumstances to have ever dropped my career in librarianship and taken up a career in business and gotten a divorce and so forth. That was all beyond my psychological capabilities. So I stayed with the library, and the good things happened. We finally got to live in a town where the schools were pretty good. Corey got a good high school education, and so did Mandy. Corey went off to Bates, although she cried because Bates had given her such a full scholarship that we had to take it, and she had wanted to go to Vassar. But that wasn't in the cards, and she did extremely well at Bates. And as I've said many times, the second happiest day of my life was graduation at Bates in, I guess, 1981, when Corey was inducted into Phi Beta Kappa. And so that was a successful time. Corey went on to various things. Mandy came along. My mother died and left me a lot of money, and both daughters encouraged me that that was the time to separate from Dorothy, which I finally did. And after 6 years of separation, I met Joyce Silver, and that began a 3-year process of falling in love with Joyce and finding a way, which was quite an ordeal, to break away from my psychological bonds to Dorothy, which were not healthy, and which over time I came to understand, just as I understood what had happened to me at various times, mid-college, after college, and then during the marriage, that I was having so much difficulty finding happiness and satisfaction. And that became an entirely new phase of life that was much more positive and lasted, I hope, the rest of my life. Now, do you want to hear anything about it? You know about the years with Joyce. You were an adult, and you can fill that in.
Maybe a few comments.
All right.
A few.
The time with Joyce was wonderful. She was an extraordinary woman, an artist, a psychotherapist, a loving person, but her love was tough love. And over the period of time that I was with her, from 1997 to her death in 2015, our relationship went through many phases, some of them very difficult. There was one time Joyce asked me to leave the loft and live by myself in Queens, which I did for about 2 years, and then we reunited and were able to establish a more loving relationship. And over the course of those, 97 to 15, almost 20, 18 years, I was in psychotherapy with several psychotherapists, one of whom I'm still with, and of course, Joyce and my relationship was partly therapeutic. Now, it's well known that a relationship with your therapist should not be romantic, but this was an exceptional situation, and Joyce helped me to understand what had transpired in my younger years that had created a situation where I was lacking self-esteem and lacking confidence, and that resolved itself over time.
And what was the interpretation of?
And the interpretation was that, first of all, the trauma of my mother dying when I was 4, and actually being out of my life at about 3.5. I was told that she was too sick to take care of me from that point on. Then I read in a book by Nancy Friday years later that the trauma of a mother's death is one of the worst things that can happen to a growing child. Then I was molested when I was 5 years old, and I didn't pay much attention to that until I always remembered it, and I never ascribed too much significance to it, but that was a mistake, and during the therapy, it was revealed that that was a devastating experience for me and really damaged my sense of self-esteem. And then it became clear that I always, in my relationships with other people, had established relationships that were competitive and comparing. And I was instinctively always comparing myself to someone. Was I better looking? Was I stronger? Was I smarter? And it was a disastrous way to go through life, and not, as Joyce would put it, to find my place in the pecking order and then flourish at that level, whatever it happened to be. I spent many years ambivalent about having gone to a place like Yale, but eventually I, during the therapy, during the time with Joyce, felt very good, eventually felt very good and confident about that experience, and that I didn't have great financial or professional success was just a sad case, and something that I didn't need to regret. I did the best I could with the circumstances that I had, and now, after Joyce died 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, I have had a couple of minor relationships with some very nice women, and then finally a couple of years ago I had the extreme good fortune to meet Linda Wasserman, who is the most wonderful companion and partner that I could imagine, whom I love dearly, and hopefully she and I will have as many years together as we can, and because of circumstances, both of us grew up in very middle or lower middle class. Joyce used to say, "No, Fred, you didn't grow up middle class, you grew up poor," with my father a high school teacher and my mother an office worker. Through Joyce's death and through Linda's uncle's death, we both came into some money that makes our later years. We're both over 80 now, and we're financially secure for the rest of our lives, and that is a tremendous relief. So we look forward to having a calm and loving later years together. Watch it, your cup.
It's empty.
Okay. I think that's it.